I started off with a 150-year-old walnut that was sourced here locally by a friend of mine who mills wood. The board was pretty wide and warped, so I cut it down into 3 different pieces, so then when I milled it up, I wouldn't be losing as much wood. I made a sled for it so I can put some shims underneath and send it through the planer so I could flatten it. Once I got it flattened, I took it over to the jointer to get one side squared up, and then went over to the bandsaw and cut each strip 1 inch thick. I didn't have enough wood from that first set, so I went ahead and did the exact same process with a couple other pieces to get more walnut for these stripes. I decided to use Purple Heart for the union, so I grabbed my Purple Heart board and cut off a piece that was just oversized for what I needed. I used one of the walnut stripes to size for my thickness to make sure that I was pretty close to the right thickness, and cut the Purple Heart down into the strips. As this board is edge grain, I need to resaw this so I can flip all the pieces over. All of the stripes on this board needed to be 1/2 inch wide, so I cut down all the maple stripes and all the walnut stripes to be 1/2 inch wide. When making a flag, you need to glue up the board in different sections. So first off, I started with the union and took all the pieces and glued those up first. Next, I glued up the lower stripes. Here I'm inspecting all of the walnut because it being so old and coming from a log and not from the local lumber mill, it isn't perfect. There are knot holes and there are cracks and things like that. So I wanted the best side to be on top, considering it was going to be a cutting board and the top was going to be used to be cutting and eating off of. So I tried to make sure that all the best parts were facing the top. I also wanted to make sure that that right edge was as flush as I could possibly get it, and pushed everything down nice and tight. I don't want to lose any width if I could possibly avoid it. Now at this point, we're getting really close to Christmas and I'm running out of time. And yes, I am out in the garage in my bathrobe. I'm dressed, but in my bathrobe, it is cold and my kids are finally asleep. It's probably 11 o'clock at night and I had to get this part glued up. So this is the upper part of the stripes that will be attached to the union. And I got this all glued up and ready to go. Okay, back the next morning, taking everything out of the clamps and putting everything together to kind of see what it will look like. Now it's time to cut and square up the top part of the stripe so I can attach the union. I need to make sure that this joint is very flush and square so the union is not crooked when it's glued together. I was trying to find something that I can brace this piece with and realized a round dowel, probably not a good idea. So I found a piece of flat stock and clamped it down so I can hold down the union and cut it without my fingers being too close. Now it's time to glue the union to these stripes. I need to make sure that at least one edge of this is as flush as possible to make it easier to run through the table saw later and flush everything up on the other side. I really need to get out of the way of the camera. I used some clamps at the joint to make sure that it wouldn't lift up and everything would be square. I really need to work on making some calls someday. I keep telling myself that. I took a very slight pass on the jointer to make sure everything was flat and flush so it would join well to the bottom section of the stripes. And now for the final glue up. Here I'll use the table saw to flush up the top of the flag of the cutting board to make sure everything is all even. I'm sorry here, I didn't realize that half of this was off camera, but I glued a sacrificial piece with some tape and CA glue to the top of the board because I want to send it through the planer to flatten everything up, but I didn't want any snipe on the board. My tolerances are really fine as far as how much wood that I can waste. My board is practically the size that I want it to be, so I put that extra piece on so I wouldn't get any snipe there on the corner. Now to flush up the ends of the cutting board, you want to make sure at this point that you're referencing the same side, so in this case the bottom of the flag or the board, to make sure that everything comes out square and you're not referencing two different faces. Now this is one of my favorite parts because this means I am almost done. So I am using a 45-degree chamfer bit to put a slight chamfer on the top of the cutting board and then a deeper chamfer on the bottom. And then my most favorite part of all is the oil. I just love the grain in this 150-year-old walnut. It is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Chris, for your service and your sacrifice.